Hollywood has a dirty secret. If you choose money over conscience, they will destroy you. In the 1980s, the apartheid regime in South Africa was oppressing millions of people, but the studios remained silent because the South African market was worth $200 million a year. Stars were warned not to speak out. Stay out of politics, mind your own business. Most complied, but Marlon Brando did not. When he donated the $4 million he earned from the 1989 film A Dry White Season to the anti-apartheid struggle, he didn't just give money, he spat in Hollywood's face. The studio's response was ruthless, a 10-year blacklist. The message was clear. The system does not forgive those who oppose us. But this story didn't start in 1989. The truth is, Marlon Brando's war with Hollywood began a full 30 years earlier, and he paid the price every time. Summer 1963. In the heat of Washington, D.C., 250,000 people had gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Martin Luther King was about to deliver his "I Have a Dream" speech, and in the crowd was a man wearing sunglasses, trying to remain unseen. Marlon Brando. He was Hollywood's brightest star at the time, having reached the pinnacle with On the Waterfront and A Streetcar Named Desire, and the role of Vito Corleone would make him a legend. But being in DC that day was a dangerous move for his career. The studios had warned him openly. Actors who participated in political demonstrations would not be insured, would be removed from projects, and would have their contracts terminated. Brando didn't care, because whatever his father had done for him, the system was doing the same to Black Americans, oppressing them, silencing them, ignoring them. Brando was crying when King gave his speech, but his tears weren't just because of King's words. FBI agents who spotted Brando in the crowd that day were taking photos. The file was opened. Marlon Brando may be a communist sympathizer. Participation in civil rights movements, read the first report. This file would swell over the next 40 years and exceed 2,000 pages. Hollywood knew this. Producers warned Brando, "Marlon, this isn't for you. Just act. Don't get involved in politics." Brando's response was clear. "I'm not involved in politics. I'm trying to be human." But the real bombshell came in 1965. Brando didn't just attend demonstrations. He began providing direct financial support to Martin Luther King Jr. He sent checks every month to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. When the FBI found out, J. Edgar Hoover personally noted, "This man is dangerous. He must be watched." Hollywood found out too, of course. The producers held a meeting and decided Brando would be labeled a difficult actor. No political activity clauses began to be added to contracts. Brando refused. "If you don't want to hire me, don't hire me, but I prefer unemployment of conscience," he said in an interview. The studios were angry but helpless because Brando still meant box office. But then Brando did something that pushed Hollywood's patience to the limit. 1968. Martin Luther King was assassinated and the streets were burning. At that time, a radical group had emerged, the Black Panther Party. They were arming themselves, defending against police violence, and calling for revolution. The FBI had declared them the greatest threat to the country. No one in Hollywood, no one, dared to approach the Black Panthers, but Marlon Brando dared. In October 1968, Brando went to the Black Panther headquarters in Oakland. He spoke for hours with Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. No one knows exactly what they discussed, but when he left, Brando had made up his mind. He would provide financial support. When the studios heard this, they went crazy. Producers called Brando to an emergency meeting and threatened him. "Marlon, if you give money to those terrorists, you'll never be seen in another project again." Brando's response was cold. "They are not terrorists. You are the ones who ignore terrorism." But Brando didn't just give money. In the fall of 1968, he did something else, quietly, secretly. When some members of the Black Panther Party were arrested, Brando paid their bail. When the FBI found out, they stamped the file red. National security threat. Hollywood found out too. And this time, it wasn't just a warning, it was punishment. 3 major projects Brando was in talks for at the time were cancelled. The official reason? Creative differences. The real reason? The blacklist had begun. But Brando's biggest blow was yet to come. In 1972, The Godfather was released, and the world was shocked. The role of Vito Corleone was one of the most iconic performances in cinema history. The Oscar seemed certain. The Academy Awards ceremony was scheduled for March 1973, and everyone expected Brando to take the stage and accept the award. But Brando had other plans. Because at that time, the Wounded Knee incident was unfolding in America. Native American activists were demanding their land back and were being besieged by the FBI. The media was silent. Hollywood didn't care, but Brando cared. When Oscar night came, Brando was at home. He didn't even turn on the TV. Instead, a young Apache woman named Sacheen Littlefeather was on stage. When the Best Actor award was given to Marlon Brando, Sacheen took the stage, dressed in traditional Native American clothing, and refused the award. Mr. Brando cannot accept this award because the film industry and television misrepresent and unfairly portray Native Americans, she said. The room fell silent. Some applauded, most were shocked. John Wayne was yelling angrily backstage, wanting to get that woman off the stage. The next day, Hollywood was in turmoil. Studio heads held an emergency meeting. The decision was one sentence. Marlon Brando will never star in our projects again. But this time it wasn't official. It wasn't written down. The blacklist is never written down anyway. Just the phones go silent. Script offers dry up. Not suitable. Replies come. That's what happened to Brando. After 1973, the big studio films didn't call him. Only independent productions and low-budget projects came his way. But Brando didn't care, because what he did that night was more valuable than money. Years passed. Brando aged, gained weight, became isolated, but his conscience was still intact. In 1989, he was 65 years old, and Nelson Mandela was still in prison in South Africa, with the apartheid regime in power. Hollywood remained silent because the South African market was big money, but one director dared, Eugene Palcy. He was going to make an anti-apartheid film called A Dry White Season, and wanted Brando to play a role. A small role, a lawyer, just a few scenes. But Brando said yes, and he set a condition. All the money he earned would go to anti-apartheid organizations. When the contract was signed, the figure was clear, $4 million. Brando would not take a single penny. Everything would be donated. The studio and producers were horrified. Because this wasn't just a donation, it was an indictment of Hollywood. It was a message saying, "You're doing business with the apartheid regime with this money, while I'm using it to support those fighting against that regime." The producers tried to persuade Brando. "Marlon, donate half and keep half for yourself." Brando refused. "Either it all goes, or I won't be in this movie," he said. When the film was released, Brando's performance was applauded. He even received an Oscar nomination. But he didn't win. More accurately, he wasn't allowed to win. Because behind the scenes, the studios had made their decision. Brando would pay the price for this. After 1989, Brando received no serious film offers. For 10 years, only small roles, cameos, voice roles, all low budget, all marginal projects. Agents didn't want to represent him. Insurance companies gave him a high-risk rating. The official reason: old, unhealthy, unreliable. The real reason: the blacklist. Richard Pryor, one of Brando's closest friends, stated clearly in a 1992 interview, "Do you know what they did to Marlon? They systematically destroyed him because he wouldn't sell his conscience. Hollywood doesn't forgive people like that. It doesn't forgive them because they are a mirror held up to itself." After Brando died in 2004, his FBI file was partially released to the public. Its contents were shocking. Every move he made from 1963 to 1990 had been monitored. Every donation recorded. Every meeting attended reported. The most striking note in the file was, "Marlon Brando is the most dangerous name in Hollywood because his fame and influence could harm the system's interests. He will continue to be monitored and, if necessary, neutralized." The term neutralized was cold, but its meaning was clear: the destruction of his career. There was also evidence of direct collaboration between Hollywood and the FBI. Studio executives provided information to the FBI: which actors were problematic, which projects contained harmful content. Brando's name was constantly on those lists. One document was particularly noteworthy: a 1974 memo. Trust in the industry has been damaged after Brando's Oscar refusal. It is no longer recommended to use him in big-budget projects. Who wrote this memo? A studio executive. Who was it sent to? The FBI's Los Angeles office. Did Brando know about this? Yes. He spoke openly about it in an interview in the 1990s. "I know they're watching me. I know they kept files. I know they sabotaged my career. But I want them to know that I know they know. I'm not afraid. Because being on the right side of history is more important than their approval." In the 1990s, Brando spent most of his time on his island in Tahiti. Tetiaroa Island, the place he bought, where he tried to build his own paradise. But it wasn't paradise. It was exile. Hollywood didn't want him. America saw him as radical. His children were scattered. Christian was in prison. Cheyenne had committed suicide. Brando was alone on that island. He would go days without speaking to anyone. He was gaining weight. His health was deteriorating. A friend who visited him in 1998 recounted, "Marlon was no longer the old Marlon. He was tired, broken, alone, but there was still that fire in his eyes, the fire of someone who had no regrets." In Tahiti, Brando read books, watched the sea, and sometimes rummaged through his old files. Thank you letters from Martin Luther King, cards from Black Panther members in prison, Sachin Littlefeather's note after the Oscar night saying, "Thank you, Mr. Brando, for being my voice." These were Brando's real Oscars, not the golden statuettes, but the proof of his conscience. In a rare interview in 2001, Brando said, "People ask me, 'Are you sorry?' What would I be sorry for? The money? Hollywood? The fame? They all come and go. But when you do what is right for a human being, that lasts forever. I chose what lasts." In July 2004, Marlon Brando died at the age of 80. His funeral was private, attended only by a few close friends. Hollywood did not hold a grand memorial service. because Brando would not have wanted it, and they didn't want to honor Brando anyway. But the world remembered. Nelson Mandela wrote a letter to Brando in the 1990s after his release from prison. Mr. Brando, you showed us that we were not alone in our struggle against apartheid. If it weren't for people like you, I might still be in prison. Bobby Seale, who benefited from Brando's support for the Black Panthers, also made a statement when Brando died. Marlon Brando was not just an actor, he was a warrior. He risked his career for us. We will never forget him. Today, when people talk about Marlon Brando, most remember The Godfather, hear Vito Corleone's whisper. But few know that Brando's true legacy is not that role. The true legacy is the story of a man who dared to sacrifice his career for his conscience. Hollywood blacklisted him. The FBI watched him. The system tried to destroy him. But Brando did not disappear, because some people become immortal not in films, but in the pages of history. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: Hollywood's dirty secret still holds true. The system today still rewards those who choose money over conscience and punishes those who refuse to sell their conscience. But people like Marlon Brando remind us that some battles are worth fighting, even if they are lost, because in the end, the only thing that remains is the person you see when you look in the mirror. When Marlon Brando looked in that mirror, he was at peace. Even without Hollywood's approval, he had the approval of his conscience, and that was more valuable than any Oscar.